They fired me. Now I'm erasing you from history.
They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I prefer mine scalding hot, with a side of public humiliation and a garnish of financial ruin. My name is Nathan Carter, and 3 months ago, I was the joke of Millbrook Heights. The accessory husband who smiled politely while his wife and her family treated him like hired help. Today, I'm the man who brought down a $50 million empire with a single phone call. But let me start at the beginning, back when I still believed my marriage was worth saving. Nathan, darling, could you fetch us more champagne? Lena's voice carried that particular tone, the one that made it clear I wasn't being asked, I was being dismissed. Her friends, clustered around our marble kitchen island like designer-clad vultures, barely glanced in my direction. Of course, sweetheart. I kept my voice level, even managed to smile. After 12 years of marriage, I'd perfected the art of swallowing my pride. It went down easier with expensive wine. As I retrieved another bottle of Dom Perignon from our Sub-Zero wine fridge, I caught fragments of their conversation. The usual gossip about whose husband was cheating, whose business was failing, whose plastic surgery looked obvious. These women had turned cruelty into an art form. I don't know how you stand it, Lena, whispered Jessica Morrison, wife of a hedge fund manager. I mean, Nathan's sweet and all, but he's so ordinary. He has his uses, Lena replied, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. He manages our investments well enough, and Daddy says it's good to have someone competent handling the small stuff. Small stuff. My portfolio management company had generated over $2 million in profits last year alone. But to the Anderson family, anything under $10 million was pocket change. I popped the cork with perhaps more force than necessary. Besides, Lena continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, it's not like I'm planning to keep him around forever. Once Daddy retires and I take over Anderson Holdings, I'll need someone with more presence. The champagne bottle slipped in my hands. I caught it just before it crashed to the floor, but not before several drops splashed onto my shirt. Nathan? Lena's voice carried a note of irritation. What's taking so long? Just a small spill, I called back, dabbing at the stain with a kitchen towel. Be right there. I stood there for a moment, staring at my reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. 42 years old, still in decent shape, with the kind of unremarkable face that people forgot 5 minutes after meeting me. Lena was right about one thing. I was ordinary. Average height, brown hair going gray at the temples, hazel eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of man who blended into crowds. But ordinary men, I'd learned, had certain advantages. People underestimated them. People ignored them. People said things around them they probably shouldn't. I returned to the kitchen with my practiced smile firmly in place. Here we are, ladies. Anything else I can get you? Actually, yes, said Margaret Thornfield, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in the county. Could you turn up the air conditioning? It's rather warm in here. I adjusted the thermostat, then retreated to my study. Through the partially open door, I could still hear their voices, their laughter. I settled behind my desk and opened my laptop, ostensibly to review some client portfolios. Instead, I found myself thinking about Lena's words. Not planning to keep me around forever. The phrase echoed in my head like a death knell. We'd met at a charity gala 15 years ago. I was a junior investment advisor then, invited only because my firm was handling the event's financial planning. She was the golden daughter of Anderson Holdings, beautiful and confident, and completely out of my league. When she approached me at the bar, I assumed she was lost or looking for someone else. You're Nathan Carter, she'd said. It wasn't a question. Guilty as charged, though I can't imagine how you know that. She'd smiled, that radiant smile that had first captured my heart. I make it my business to know promising young men in finance. Dance with me? The courtship had been a whirlwind. Expensive dinners, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, introductions to her wealthy friends and family. I'd felt like Cinderella, if Cinderella had been a middle-class investment advisor from Ohio. The wedding was a society event, covered in 3 different magazines. 200 guests, a 12-piece orchestra, flowers flown in from Ecuador. Charles Anderson spared no expense for his daughter's big day, though he made it clear the celebration was more about the Anderson name than the groom. "Welcome to the family, son," he'd said during our first dance, his hand heavy on my shoulder. "Just remember, Lena's happiness is what matters most. Everything else is negotiable." I'd thought it was typical father of the bride protectiveness. Now I wondered if it had been a warning. The early years had been good. Great, even. Lena seemed genuinely happy, and I was building my investment firm from the ground up. We bought the house in Millbrook Heights, a 6-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage and enough space to raise the family we both wanted. Then came the miscarriages. 3 of them, each one taking a little more light out of Lena's eyes. After the 3rd, she'd withdrawn into herself, spending more time with her family, more time at charity events and social gatherings. Always without me. "You wouldn't enjoy it," she'd say. "It's mostly business talk and gossip. You'd be bored to tears." I'd believed her, at first. I was building my client base, working 60-hour weeks, grateful for any excuse to avoid stuffy social events. But as the years passed, the exclusion became more pointed, more deliberate. The voices from the kitchen grew louder, more animated. I caught Lena's laugh, the one she reserved for her best stories. I wondered what she was telling them about me now. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant, Riley. The Anderson Holdings quarterly report came in. "Want me to send it over?" Reluctant. He hesitated, then typed back. "Yes, please." Charles Anderson had never officially made me Anderson Holdings' investment advisor, but over the years I'd provided enough profitable recommendations that he'd started running major decisions past me. It was a point of pride, one of the few ways I felt truly useful to the family. The report arrived in my email a moment later. I opened it, scanning the numbers with practiced ease. Revenue was up 8% year over year, but operating costs had increased by 12%. Not terrible, but not great either. The company was carrying too much debt, expanding too aggressively into markets they didn't understand. I was making notes for my recommendations when I heard Lena's voice again, clearer this time. "The best part is, he has no idea. Nathan's so trusting, so naive. He actually thinks I married him for love." That followed was like ice water in my veins. "So, when are you going to tell him?" This was Jessica's voice. "Tell him what? That I've been seeing Tyler for 6 months? That Daddy's planning to restructure the company and push Nathan out? That the prenup he signed is ironclad and he'll be lucky to walk away with his little investment firm?" More laughter. Why spoil the surprise? Tyler Voss, the strategic consultant Charles had hired last year. Tall, handsome, with the kind of easy confidence that came from old money and older connections. I'd met him twice, both times at Anderson Holdings board meetings. He'd barely acknowledged my existence. I sat back in my chair, staring at the computer screen without seeing it. The numbers blurred together as my mind raced. 6 months. She'd been cheating on me for 6 months, and I'd been completely oblivious. No, not oblivious. Willfully blind. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden interest in yoga classes and book clubs that never seemed to involve actual yoga or books. The signs had been there. I'd just chosen to ignore them. The conversation in the kitchen had moved on to other topics, but I was no longer listening. I was thinking, planning, calculating. Lena thought I was naive, trusting, ordinary. She was right about ordinary, but naive? That remained to be seen. I opened a new browser window and began typing. If my wife wanted to play games, I'd be happy to oblige her. But she'd quickly learned that in games of strategy and finance, the quiet man in the corner often held all the best cards. The first search was simple. Tyler Voss, Strategic Consulting. The results were illuminating. 3 previous firms, each one ending in acrimonious departures. 2 lawsuits alleging breach of contract. 1 sealed settlement that suggested something much worse. My wife had excellent taste in men. The Anderson Holdings boardroom was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown, a mahogany table that could seat 20, and oil paintings of company founders glaring down from walnut-paneled walls. I'd been in this room dozens of times over the years, but always as a guest, never as an equal. Today felt different. Nathan, good to see you. Charles Anderson's handshake was firm, his smile politician perfect. At 62, he still cut an imposing figure. Silver hair, tailored suit, the bearing of a man accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. I appreciate you coming in on such short notice. Mitchell, of course. Your message said it was urgent. Temptation. It is. He gestured to a chair halfway down the table. Not at the head, not even close to it. The message was clear. We need to discuss some strategic changes to the company structure. Assigned seat and glanced around the table. The usual suspects were there. CFO Robert Hayes, VP of Operations Linda Morrison, General Counsel David Park, and at Charles's right hand, like a faithful dog, sat Tyler Voss. He was everything I wasn't. 6'2", silver-haired in a distinguished rather than aging way, with the kind of smile that suggested he knew secrets you didn't. His suit probably cost more than most people's cars. Tyler's been conducting a comprehensive review of our operations, Charles began, his tone suggesting this was wonderful news. His recommendations are quite illuminating. Tyler leaned forward, his smile widening. Thank you, Charles. I'll get straight to the point. His eyes found mine across the table. Anderson Holdings is at a crossroads. We can continue with incremental growth, or we can make the bold moves necessary to dominate our market sector. Relinquix. I kept my expression neutral. What kind of bold moves? Vertical integration, strategic acquisitions, a complete restructuring of our investment portfolio. Each word was delivered with the confidence of a man who'd never been wrong about anything. The old ways of doing business, the conservative, small-scale approaches, they're holding us back. Shells. My ways. My ways. That sounds expensive, I said carefully. Tyler's laugh was rich, condescending. You can't make money without spending money, Nathan. I know that's not how you operate, but we're talking about playing in the big leagues here. Charles nodded approvingly. Tyler's projections show potential returns of 30 to 40% within 18 months. I'd seen those projections. Tyler had sent them to me last week, requesting my input. They were ambitious to the point of fantasy, based on market conditions that existed only in his imagination. The projections assume optimal market conditions, I said. What happens if interest rates rise? If the real estate bubble bursts? If we hit another recession? We adapt, Tyler said. In the two medias, Astra other, we don't know what we had another recession. We adapt, Tyler said smoothly. That's what separates successful companies from the also-rans. Vision, courage, the willingness to take calculated risks. These aren't calculated risks. They're gambles. Thirst temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Charles's smile became strained. Nathan, he said, his voice carrying a warning. I think you're being unnecessarily pessimistic. Slamming. I'm being realistic. The debt-to-equity ratios alone, Fleming, are well within industry standards, Tyler interrupted. I understand this might seem overwhelming from your perspective. But Anderson Holdings isn't a boutique investment firm. We operate on a different scale entirely. Marshall. The condescension in his voice was unmistakable. Around the table, I could see the other board members nodding along. Tyler had done his homework, built his coalition. This wasn't a discussion. It was a coronation. There's one more thing, Charles said, his tone becoming more formal. These changes will require a significant restructuring of our advisory relationships. We'll be bringing in a new firm to handle our investment portfolio. Voss Strategic Partners. Of course, Tyler's own company. I should have seen it coming. What about our current arrangement? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Charles had the grace to look uncomfortable. We appreciate everything you've done for us over the years, Nathan. But we need advisors who understand our new direction, who can think bigger. Think bigger. Like thinking bigger about my wife, perhaps? I sat back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Around the table, I could feel the discomfort growing. They'd expected me to argue, to fight, to make this difficult. Instead, I simply nodded. I understand, I said finally. When do you want to make the transition? Charles blinked, clearly surprised by my acquiescence. Well, We were thinking gradually, over the next few months. No need. I stood up, straightening my jacket. I'll have all Anderson Holdings assets transferred to Voss Strategic by end of business tomorrow. Sluggish. Tyler's smile faltered slightly. That's very professional of you, Nathan. I try to be. I gathered my papers, taking my time. Just out of curiosity, Tyler, how long have you been planning this takeover? I wouldn't call it a takeover. 6 months? 7? I glanced at Charles. About the same time you started seeing my wife, I'd imagine. Marshall. The silence that followed was deafening. Charles went pale. Tyler's carefully composed expression cracked, just for a moment. Nathan, Charles began, I don't know what you think. I think you've made your position very clear. I tucked my papers under my arm. All of you have. And now, I'll make mine clear. I walked to the head of the table, to Charles's chair. He looked up at me with something that might have been fear. Anderson Holdings currently has $47 million invested through my firm, I said conversationally. Did you know that? I'm sure Tyler's done his due diligence, but let me refresh everyone's memory. Tyler was no longer smiling. Nathan, what are you? 12 in municipal bonds, 15 million in blue chip stocks, 8 million in real estate investment trusts, and 22 million in a very exclusive hedge fund that I manage personally. I paused, savoring the moment. The same hedge fund that's been generating those lovely quarterly returns you've all been enjoying. Jamaica. Charles's voice was barely a whisper. Nathan, let's discuss this rationally. Oh, I'm being perfectly rational. You see, when you fire your investment advisor, certain things happen automatically. Legal protections kick in. Fiduciary responsibilities end. I smiled, and for the first time in years, it was completely genuine. As of right now, Anderson Holdings' $47 million is being liquidated and returned to your accounts. All of it. Today, the color drained from Tyler's face. You can't do that. There are contracts, which you just voided by terminating our relationship. I checked with my lawyers this morning. I turned back to Charles. Of course, liquidating that much at once will trigger some complications, market fluctuations, early withdrawal penalties, tax implications. I estimate you'll lose about 15% in the process. Maybe 20. You son of a witch, Tyler snarled, half rising from his chair. Careful, Tyler. That's my wife's boyfriend you're talking about. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Charles? You might want to check Anderson Holdings' credit rating tomorrow. When the markets see a $47 million emergency liquidation, they tend to get nervous. Something about companies in financial distress. Relink left them there, frozen in their expensive chairs, contemplating the smoking crater I'd just left in their carefully laid plans. The elevator ride down felt like floating. My phone started ringing before I reached the parking garage. Charles, probably, or maybe Tyler. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, and again. By the time I reached my car, a modest BMW sedan that suddenly felt like a chariot of victory, I had 7 missed calls and a dozen text messages. I scrolled through them as I sat in the driver's seat, engine running. Charles, Nathan, call me immediately. We can work this out. Tyler, you're making a huge mistake. This isn't over. What the heck did you do? Daddy's having chest pains. That last one actually made me smile. Charles Anderson was many things, but fragile wasn't one of them. If he was having chest pains, they were probably caused by watching his net worth plummet in real time. I drove home slowly, taking the scenic route through Millbrook Heights. The neighborhood looked different somehow. The manicured lawns less impressive, the McMansions more pretentious than grand. Amazing how perspective could shift in a single afternoon. Lana's Mercedes was in the driveway when I pulled up, along with a car I didn't recognize. A silver Porsche with vanity plates reading TVOSS1. Subtle as always. I found them in the living room, huddled together on our Italian leather sofa like conspirators in a bad spy movie. Lena jumped up when I walked in, her face flushed with anger. Are you insane? She demanded. Do you have any idea what you've done? I withdrew my investments from a failing company, I said mildly. Seemed like sound financial planning. Tyler stood up slowly, his earlier composure replaced by barely controlled rage. Up close, he was even more imposing than he'd seemed in the boardroom. But I'd learned something today. Size and presence meant nothing when you held all the cards. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Years of planning, millions of dollars in potential revenue." Potential being the operative word. I set my briefcase down carefully, making sure to maintain eye contact. "Your projections were fantasy, Tyler. Anderson Holdings was heading for bankruptcy within 2 years. I just accelerated the timeline." "That's not true," Lena snapped. "Daddy's company is solid. It's been profitable for decades. Your daddy's company is leveraged to the hilt and expanding into markets it doesn't understand. The only thing keeping it afloat was the steady returns from my investments. Without that foundation," I shrugged. "Well, you'll find out soon enough." Tyler took a step toward me, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you're clever, don't you? The little man finally fighting back?" "I think I'm practical. When someone declares war on me, I respond accordingly." "Where?" Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Nathan, this is ridiculous. So what if Tyler and I have been close? These things happen. We're all adults here." "Close." I savored the word. "Is that what we're calling it?" I was thinking more along the lines of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud, but close works too. The face went white. "What are you talking about?" I walked to my briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. "Funny thing about being invisible, Tyler. People forget you're there. They say things they shouldn't say, do things they shouldn't do." I opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. Like meeting at the Riverside Hotel every Tuesday afternoon for the past 6 months. The photo showed Tyler and Lena entering the hotel together, his hand on her lower back, her face turned up toward his with an expression I hadn't seen in years. My private investigator had done excellent work. "You had us followed?" Lena's voice was barely a whisper. "I had my assets protected. Standard procedure when dealing with potentially hostile parties." I pulled out another document. "Like this email thread between you and Tyler, discussing the best way to phase out the dead weight from Anderson Holdings. That would be me, in case anyone's confused." Tyler lunged toward the folder, but I pulled it back smoothly. "Copies," I said. "Multiple copies, along with bank records showing Tyler's consulting fees, which coincidentally started the same week you two began your affair. Amazing how love and money so often go hand in hand." Sluggish. Lena sank back onto the sofa, her perfect composure finally cracking. "Nathan, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, rebuild our marriage." Misinformation. "Our marriage ended 6 months ago, Lena. You just forgot to tell me." I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. "But don't worry, I'm not vindictive. I'll give you exactly what you deserve." "And what's that?" Tyler demanded. "Each other." I headed for the stairs. "I'll be packing a bag. I suggest you both be gone by the time I come back down." "You can't kick me out of my own house," Lena called after me. "Actually, I can. The deed's in my name, remember? Your daddy insisted on it for tax purposes." I paused at the foot of the stairs. "But don't worry about finding a place to stay. I'm sure Tyler's apartment has room for 2. Disregard. I was halfway up the stairs when Tyler's voice stopped me. "This isn't over, Nathan. You think you've won, but you have no idea who you're dealing with." I turned around slowly. Tyler was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his face twisted with rage. Lena was beside him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You're right," I said. "I don't know who I'm dealing with, but I'm looking forward to finding out." Freshman. Minutes later, I was packed and ready to go. I'd taken only what I needed: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the contents of our bedroom safe. The rest could wait. Lena and Tyler were still in the living room when I came back downstairs, but they'd moved apart, no longer the united front they'd presented earlier. Tyler was pacing by the windows, his phone pressed to his ear. Lena was curled up on the sofa, staring at nothing. "The locks will be changed tomorrow," I told her as I headed for the door. "My lawyer will be in touch about divorce proceedings." "Nathan, wait!" She stood up, reaching toward me. "Please, we can fix this. I made a mistake, but we can—" "You made a choice, Lena. Live with it." I walked out of the house we'd shared for 12 years and didn't look back. The Marriott downtown wasn't the Ritz, but it was comfortable and anonymous. I checked in under my own name, no point in hiding, and settled into a corner suite on the 15th floor. The city spread out below me, lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. My phone had been buzzing constantly during the drive. More calls from Charles, increasingly desperate text messages from Lena, and several numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off and poured myself a scotch from the minibar. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt completely at peace. That peace lasted exactly 18 minutes. The knock on my door was soft, but insistent. I checked the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-30s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Carter, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm an attorney representing Anderson Holdings. Could we speak for a moment?" I opened the door but left the chain latch engaged. "It's rather late for business calls, Miss Mitchell." "Couldn't wait. My client is prepared to make you a very generous offer to reconsider your decision." "What kind of offer?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The kind that could make this whole unpleasant situation go away, for everyone involved. I considered this for a moment, then unlatched the chain. "Come in, but make it quick." Sarah Mitchell was younger than she'd seemed in the hallway, probably early 30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made her dangerous. She settled into the suite's armchair like she owned it. "Anderson Holdings is prepared to offer you a consulting contract worth $5 million over 3 years," she began without preamble. "In exchange, you'd agree to reinvest the funds you withdrew today and sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding any personal matters involving the Anderson family." $5 million to keep my mouth shut and pretend my wife isn't cheating on me? That's a crude way to put it, but essentially accurate. I sipped my scotch. $5 million. Sir Militer was not the plast, unless Och, considering. $5 million was serious money, even by my standards. It would set me up for life, let me retire early, maybe buy a place somewhere warm and anonymous. "What happens if I say no?" I asked. Her smile became predatory. "Mr. Carter, you've made some very powerful enemies today. The Anderson family has resources you can't imagine. Connections in business, politics, law enforcement. It would be unfortunate if those resources were turned against you." "Is that a threat, Ms. Mitchell?" "It's a reality check. You're a small fish in a very large pond. Don't mistake one lucky move for actual power." I set down my glass and stood up. "Thank you for the offer. Please tell Mr. Anderson that I'll consider it carefully." "How long do you need?" "I'll have an answer for you tomorrow morning." I walked to the door and opened it. "Good evening, Miss Mitchell." She gathered her briefcase and stood. "Mr. Carter, I hope you'll make the smart choice, for everyone's sake." After she left, I sat by the window and stared out at the city lights. $5 million. It was tempting, I had to admit, but it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about respect, about being treated like a man instead of a convenient accessory. I turned my phone back on and scrolled through the messages until I found the one I was looking for. Riley, my assistant, had sent it 3 hours ago. "Local news wants to interview you about the Anderson Holdings situation. Interested?" I began typing my reply. The Channel 7 news van was parked outside the Marriott when I came down for breakfast the next morning. I'd agreed to meet reporter Jennifer Walsh in the hotel restaurant. Neutral territory, public enough to prevent any unpleasantness. Jennifer was younger than her voice suggested, maybe 28, with the kind of aggressive ambition that made for good television. She'd done her homework, too. Her questions were sharp, informed, and designed to extract maximum drama. "Mr. Carter, sources tell us that Anderson Holdings lost nearly $50 million yesterday due to your decision to withdraw investments. Do you have any comment?" I Simmons. I sipped my coffee, taking my time. "Anderson Holdings made a business decision to terminate our relationship. I made a business decision to protect my client's assets. That's how the market works. But surely you knew the timing would cause maximum damage to the company. All knew the timing would minimize damage to my investors. Anderson Holdings' problems are their own making." She leaned forward, sensing weakness in the water. "There are rumors that this dispute involves more than just business, that there are personal issues between you and the Anderson family. I don't comment on personal matters." What about your relationship with Tyler Voss, the strategic consultant who's been working with Anderson Holdings? Interesting. Someone had been feeding her information. I wondered if it was Charles, trying to control the narrative, or Tyler, trying to salvage his reputation. Mr. Voss is a business associate of the Anderson family. I have no relationship with him whatsoever. Sources suggest that Mr. Voss has been having an affair with your wife. Any comment? There it was, the question I'd been expecting. I set down my coffee cup and looked directly into the camera. My marriage is a private matter. However, I will say this. When people betray your trust, whether in business or in personal relationships, there are consequences. Actions have results, and those results are rarely pleasant for the people who chose betrayal over honesty. The interview aired on the noon news. By 2 o'clock, my phone was ringing off the hook. The first call was from Charles Anderson. His voice was strained, exhausted. Nathan, we need to talk. This media circus isn't helping anyone. I thought the media loved a good business story, I replied, especially one involving family drama and corporate intrigue. This has gone far enough. Name your price. My price? To make this go away. To stop talking to reporters, stop spreading rumors, stop destroying everything my family has built. For a long moment, letting him sweat. Charles, I haven't spread any rumors. I haven't made any accusations. I simply answered questions about business decisions. If that's destroying your family, maybe the problem isn't with my answers. You know exactly what you're doing. Yes, I do. I'm protecting myself and my interests, just like you taught me. The line went dead. The second call was from Tyler Voss. He was less diplomatic. You son of a witch. You think you can destroy me with innuendo and half-truths? I haven't said anything about you, Tyler. Not yet. What's that supposed to mean? It means that so far, I've been a perfect gentleman. I've kept private matters private. But if you or your friends want to escalate this situation, I let the threat hang in the air. You're playing with fire, Nathan. I'm not some weak old man you can push around. No, you're a weak young man. Much easier to handle. He hung up on me. The third call was from Lena. She was crying. Nathan, please. This is humiliating. My friends, my family, everyone's talking about us. That must be difficult for you. Don't be cruel. I know I hurt you, but this is destroying my life. Your life was destroyed the moment you decided to betray our marriage. I'm just making sure everyone knows who's responsible. I'll fight you on the divorce. I'll take everything. With what money? Your family's broke, remember? And Tyler's consulting business is about to collapse when word gets out about his methods. She was quiet for a moment, then, what do you want, Nathan? What will it take to end this? I want you to understand something, Lena. For 12 years, I was the invisible man in our marriage, the accessory husband, the one who smiled politely while your family treated me like hired help. But invisible men see everything. They hear everything. And they remember everything. Nathan, I'm not done. You want to know what I want? I want you to feel exactly as small and powerless as you made me feel. I want Tyler to understand that actions have consequences. And I want your father to learn that some people can't be bought, bullied, or dismissed. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared, because this is just the beginning. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I called Riley. I need you to set up a meeting, I told her, with every major business reporter in the city. It's time to tell the whole story. The press conference was scheduled for the next morning, but word leaked out by evening. My phone, which I'd turned back on to coordinate with Riley, was buzzing constantly. Reporters, lawyers, and numbers I didn't recognize. One call stood out. The caller ID showed only a number, but the voice was unmistakable. Mr. Carter, this is Detective Ray Morrison with the city police. I'd like to speak with you about some allegations that have been made. My blood went cold. What kind of allegations? Someone's filed a complaint suggesting you might be engaged in some form of harassment or stalking. Could you come down to the station tomorrow morning, just to clear things up? Of course. Should I bring a lawyer? That's up to you, sir. This is just a preliminary conversation. Afterwards, he hung up. I sat in my hotel room staring out at the city lights. So they were playing hardball now, using the police to intimidate me, trying to paint me as the aggressor. I called my lawyer, David Chen, and filled him in on the situation. "They're trying to get ahead of the story," he said after I'd explained everything. "Make you look unstable before your press conference. Classic damage control." "Will it work?" "Depends on what evidence they have. Nathan, please tell me you haven't actually been stalking anyone." I hired a private investigator to document my wife's affair. Everything was legal and above board. "Good. We'll meet at the police station tomorrow morning. Handle this quickly. Then proceed with your press conference as planned." But I was already thinking ahead, planning my next moves. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I'd been playing nice for 12 years. It was time to show them what dirty really looked like. I opened my laptop and began typing. If they wanted a war, I'd give them one they'd never forget. The email I sent to Jennifer Walsh contained everything. Bank records showing the correlation between Tyler's consulting fees and his affair with Lena. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even credit card records showing Tyler had been buying my wife jewelry while I was paying for her health insurance. But the real bombshell was the document I'd found buried in Anderson Holdings' quarterly reports. Evidence that Tyler had been systematically overcharging for his services, inflating his hours, and billing for work that was never completed. It wasn't just adultery. It was fraud. I hit send and smiled. Tomorrow's press conference was going to be very interesting indeed. The police station meeting lasted exactly 37 minutes. Detective Morrison was professional, but skeptical, clearly going through the motions to satisfy whoever had filed the complaint. "Mr. Carter, Mrs. Carter, alleges that you've been following her, taking photographs, and making threatening phone calls." David Chen leaned forward. "Detective, do you have any evidence of these alleged activities?" "We have Mrs. Carter's statement. But no photographs of my client following anyone? No recordings of threatening calls? No witnesses to any stalking behavior?" Marriott shifted uncomfortably. "The investigation is ongoing." David pulled out a manila folder. "What we do have is evidence that Mrs. Carter has been conducting an extramarital affair for 6 months, using marital assets to fund her activities, and conspiring with her lover to defraud my client of his business relationships." He spread the documents across Morrison's desk. Hotel receipts, restaurant bills, the private investigator's photos, bank records showing suspicious transfers. My client hired a licensed private investigator to document adultery for divorce proceedings. Everything was conducted legally and within the bounds of matrimonial law. Morrison studied the documents, his expression growing more skeptical by the minute. "These are some serious allegations, Mr. Carter." "They're not allegations, Detective. They're facts. Documented facts." "About the threatening phone calls." I pulled out my phone. "I'd be happy to provide my call logs. You'll find that Mrs. Carter has called me 43 times in the past week. I've called her exactly twice. Once to inform her I was filing for divorce, and once to tell her the locks on our house were being changed." David added another document to the pile. "We're also prepared to file criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement against Tyler Voss, Mrs. Carter's alleged lover. The evidence is quite compelling." Morrison looked like a man who'd bitten into what he thought was a chocolate chip cookie, only to discover it was oatmeal raisin. "Mr. Carter, I think we're done here, but I'd advise you to keep your distance from Mrs. Carter while the divorce proceedings are ongoing." "That won't be a problem, Detective. I have no desire to see her again." We waited out of the police station when David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smiled. Channel 7 just aired their follow-up story, the one about Tyler Voss's billing irregularities. How bad is it? For them, career ending. For you, vindication. The press conference that afternoon was standing room only. Jennifer Walsh had done her job well. The story had legs, and every major news outlet in the city wanted a piece of it. I sat at a table in the hotel conference room, David beside me, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely calm. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, 3 days ago, I was informed that my services as an investment advisor were no longer needed by Anderson Holdings. Today, I want to explain why that decision may have been motivated by factors other than business performance. Out the timeline methodically. Tyler's hiring, the beginning of his affair with Lena, the gradual exclusion from family business decisions, the discovery of fraudulent billing practices. I want to be clear, I said, looking directly into the cameras. I'm not angry about my wife's affair. Marriages end. People fall out of love. These things happen. What I'm angry about is the systematic attempt to defraud me of my business relationships while conducting that affair on my dime. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Carter, what's your response to allegations that you've been stalking Mrs. Carter? I've been documenting adultery for divorce proceedings. There's a legal difference, though I understand the distinction might be lost on people who've been playing fast and loose with legal boundaries themselves. Another reporter. What's your next step? Justice, both civil and criminal. Mr. Voss will be facing charges for fraud and embezzlement. Anderson Holdings will be facing a lawsuit for breach of contract and conspiracy. And Mrs. Carter will be facing the reality that actions have consequences. Are you seeking financial compensation? I smiled for the first time during the conference. I'm seeking something much more valuable than money. I'm seeking the truth. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, but the damage was done. By evening, the story was trending on social media. #MarginCall was everywhere. My revenge had gone viral. That night, alone in my hotel room, I finally allowed myself to feel something approaching satisfaction. My phone had been buzzing constantly. Interview requests, book deal offers, even a call from a Hollywood producer interested in the film rights. But the call that mattered came at 11:47 p.m. Charles Anderson, his voice barely a whisper. Nathan, you've won. What do you want to make this stop? I want Tyler Voss arrested and charged with fraud. Trembling, I want Anderson Holdings to publicly apologize for their business practices and pay damages to every client affected by Tyler's fraudulent billing. How much? Whatever the courts decide. I'm not interested in negotiating. And Lena? I was quiet for a long moment. Lena made her choice. She can live with the consequences. Nathan, I'm sorry. I truly am. I let my ambition cloud my judgment, and I hurt someone who'd been nothing but loyal to our family. Yes, you did. Is there anything I can do to make this right? You can learn from it, and you can make sure it never happens again. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, Tyler would be arrested. Anderson Holdings would begin the long process of rebuilding their reputation, and Lena would have to face the reality of what her choices had cost her. As for me, I had one more move to make, the final piece of my revenge, and the most satisfying one of all. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to every major investment firm in the city. By morning, they'd all know that Nathan Carter was available for new business relationships, and they'd all know exactly what happened to people who tried to cheat him. The invisible man was invisible no more. 6 weeks later, Tyler Voss was arrested at his downtown office on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The perp walk made the evening news. Tyler in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his perfect hair disheveled. I watched it from my new office, a corner suite in the city's premier financial district. Business was booming. Turns out, when you publicly humiliate people who try to cheat you, other potential clients take notice. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the press conference. Everyone wanted to hire the man who'd brought down Anderson Holdings. Lena had filed for divorce 2 weeks after Tyler's arrest, citing irreconcilable differences. Her lawyer had tried to claim half of everything, but the prenup she'd insisted on 12 years ago worked both ways. Adultery voided her claims to my business assets. She'd get the house, which was underwater on its mortgage, and half of our joint savings account, which amounted to about $30,000. I'd offered her more in the settlement negotiations, not out of generosity, but because I wanted her to refuse. I wanted her to be greedy, vindictive, demanding. It made what came next so much sweeter. The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Lena, her voice strained with desperation. Nathan, I need help. What kind of help? Financial help. The house is Justin's. There's just a tension. I dropped the whole city complete. Financial help. The house is in foreclosure. I can't make the payments without Daddy's support. And the company. She trailed off. Anderson Holdings had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 2 weeks earlier. Charles had managed to save some of the business, but the days of unlimited family wealth were over. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Not sorry enough to help, but sorry nonetheless. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I hurt you. But I'm desperate, Nathan. I have nowhere else to turn. What about Tyler? Tyler's in jail. His assets are frozen. His business is gone. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Lena was probably sitting in our old house, surrounded by the remnants of her privileged life, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. Lena, do you remember what you told your friends that night? About me being ordinary, about not planning to keep me around forever? Nathan, do you remember laughing about how naive I was, how trusting? I was wrong. I was wrong. I was wrong on the other store. I just imagine. I was cruel and wrong, and I'm sorry. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. The line was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you want me to say? That I was a terrible wife? That I threw away the best thing in my life for a man who turned out to be a criminal? That I destroyed my family's business because I was too proud to admit I'd made a mistake? I don't want you to say anything, Lena. I want you to understand something. What? For 12 years, you and your family treated me like I was invisible, like I didn't matter, like I was some kind of accessory you could discard when you found something better. I stood up and walked to the window. But invisible men see everything. They hear everything. And they never, ever forget. Missiles, please! The house will be sold at auction next month. Tyler will spend the next 5 years in federal prison. Your father's company will survive, but it'll never be more than a shadow of what it was. And you, I paused, savoring the moment. You'll have to live with the knowledge that you destroyed everything because you thought you were smarter than the ordinary man you married. I know I deserve this, but there is no but, Lena. This is justice. Pure and simple. I hung up and turned off my phone. Then I poured myself a scotch and sat back down at my desk. There was work to do. New clients to call, investments to manage, a business empire to build. The intercom buzzed. Riley's voice. Mr. Carter? There's a reporter here from Forbes magazine. Something about a cover story on revenge in the digital age. Setbacks, I smiled and straightened my tie. Send them in. Interview ran 3 weeks later with the headline, The Invisible Man's Revenge. How Nathan Carter Brought Down a Business Empire. It was picked up by CNN, MSNBC, and the Wall Street Journal. Hollywood called again, this time with a 7-figure offer for the film rights. I turned them all down. Some stories are too personal to share with the world. But I did frame the magazine cover and hang it in my office, right next to my desk where I could see it every day. A reminder that ordinary men, when pushed far enough, are capable of extraordinary things. 6 months later, I was having lunch at the city's most exclusive restaurant when I saw her. Lena, sitting alone at a corner table, wearing a dress I recognized from our marriage. Designer, but at least 3 years old. She looked older, tired, diminished. Our eyes met across the room. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she raised her hand in a small wave, almost tentative. I nodded politely and returned to my meal. Some people might call that cruel. I call it justice. The waiter brought my check and I left a generous tip. Business was good, life was good, and the future looked brighter than it had in years. As I walked out of the restaurant, I passed Lena's table. She was staring out the window, her meal barely touched, lost in thoughts I couldn't imagine and didn't want to share. Goodbye, Lena, I said quietly. She looked up, startled. Nathan? I didn't expect to see you here. I come here often now. It's convenient to my office. Your office? The Carter Investment Group. We're in the Meridian building, 42nd floor. Perhaps you've seen our ads? She shook her head, looking confused. We're doing quite well. 150 million under management. Growing every month. Amazing what happens when you treat people with respect and honesty. I could see the realization dawning in her eyes. Not just that I was successful, but that I was successful beyond anything she'd ever imagined possible. Nathan, Take care of yourself, Lena. And next time you're tempted to underestimate someone, remember that the ordinary-looking man in the corner might be the most dangerous person in the room. I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, my footsteps light, my conscience clear. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about destruction. It was about revelation. About showing people who they really were and making them live with the consequences. Behind me, I could hear Lena crying softly. But that was her burden to bear, not mine. I had a business to run, a life to live, and a future to build. And for the first time in years, that future belonged entirely to me.